Hi, hello, leavers and believers and other people. I always like to think that people get like trapped in the car or something, having to listen to this, and they're like, I don't want to listen to this. And then, hello, you who's being forced to listen to a podcast against your will. This is our little show called Leaving Hillsong, and it's all about leaving Hillsong. My name's Tanya, and today we've got one of the OG leavers. My next guest needs no introduction. I've waited my whole life to say that. However, just in case Rick Van Winkle's listening in and doesn't know, I've been under a rock or in a cave somewhere. I've known this man for nearly 40 years. And throughout that time, he has done nothing but support me, help me, inform me, and encourage me. And at the time he did it, it was a big deal. Geoff Bullock was one of the original Hills Christian Life Centre pastors. He was the music man. And I knew him then. I was only a kid. I was 14 and 15 and then Geoff left Hillsong in 1995. There's a very cool story of how we ran into each other in 2005 randomly when I had started writing People in Glass Houses. I had been looking for Geoff everywhere, but I'll get him to tell that story later on. It's incredible. I started writing then, and I actually can't name anybody else who has been that public, who has supported me and stood by me publicly, consistently, faithfully. I mean, in 2005, we ended up sitting down and he told me all the stories then, stories that people are still too concerned to talk about. Geoff's done a few interviews and his story is, it's the standard leaving Hillsong treatment, only, to whom much is given in Hillsong, much will be punished if they don't toe the line. And Geoff was punished hard when he chose to leave. His reputation was threatened. His CDs were crushed. Hillsong hierarchy did everything they could to ruin him personally and professionally. But guess what? He's the same person. So I said to him, look, let's do something different. Let's talk about other stuff. And so it was funny because we sat down and we just started talking. This isn't planned. This isn't scripted, or we just started. As you hear later on, Geoff will join me again because you just got to talk about stuff. Get that history out there because no one else is doing it. A lot of those OG boys are still there. There's only about 6 of them. Anyway, so yeah, this very pod turned 2. It was the second anniversary of the launch of this pod on the day that we interviewed. So I've been saying this is your birthday present. I didn't really make a fuss about the first birthday because I kind of forgot last year. So that should give you some indication of what kind of parent I am. This is all just, this is as close to a genuine conversation that you can listen into as we get. I really hope you enjoy a spiritual milkshake. This conversation is a bit of a milkshake as well. Grab those snacks, get comfy, whatever you want to do. Here's the wonderful Geoff Bullock talking about a spiritual milkshake. Hi, Geoff.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited. I've waited so long to say hi,
Yeah.
Geoff.
Well, hi, Tanya. Yes, no, it's been a long time and it's been a very interesting journey for me since I decided the time for silence was up. And so I have I've been wanting to do this, and I'm glad the opportunity's finally arrived.
Well, you've been to everybody else's party, and I've waited very patiently. And
But to be honest, I needed to wait until I had sorted out I suppose my theology about the whole thing. I know that we can't just talk about the notoriety and the sensationalism and court cases and things. For people who are grieving and suffering from the implosion of this empire, they need to know that there is a scriptural way out of it. Even if they want to dismiss the Bible, you don't have to feel guilty about God. God didn't abandon you. And in the end, I suppose scripturally they abandoned God, which they're not going to like. But like let's have a theological argument.
could they? Could they?
Oh, I'd love to.
I mean, there's very little encouragement to pursue scripture unless this is the verse I'm using today. No, I just remember it being, okay, go home, pray, read your Bible. And now there seems to be just go home and pray for the church.
Yes, look, for me, in our conversation before we pressed record, this is only recently, I realized that the Bible, however you want to see the Bible, to a Christian organization whose mandate is to represent the Bible, and in the end, because it's called Christian, to represent Jesus as the Christ, the Bible has to become their constitution. It has to be the very foundational document which everything built on. And therefore, if you take the Beatitudes, then that has to be Jesus' preamble to this constitution. Now, the Beatitudes, if you want me to, I'll just give you a bit. He goes down and says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And blessed are they of me, for they inherit the earth." We have a Christianity that's built on spiritual power, prophetic power, apostolic power, muscular men and women dressed up to the nines in the prosperity of God. That is not a spiritual poverty. A spiritual poverty is one where your need of Christ is all that you have to do anything. If you do it any other way, then then you're breaking preamble to the Constitution. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, that's lovely, and because it seems very simple. Isn't this the kind of stuff that people have had wars over for centuries, though, the interpretations of the Bible?
Well, no, I'm just saying it is simple. It's just simple if you want to have a church and be a minister of Jesus Christ, is what Brian would like to say, then Brian says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Brian, if you are teaching the kingdom of heaven, then you need to be bringing people to a point where it's not about spiritual pride, spiritual arrogance, spiritual egotism, spiritual mumbo jumbo. It's about it's putting the whole thing into reverse. And I'm not explaining myself very well, but
You are absolutely explaining.
and what I'm saying is that if you look at Hillsong, I cannot see a habitual, continual, and encouraged practice of a recognition of our inabilities. Our poverty is a bad word. Our inabilities, our humility, our meekness, our mourning, our sadnesses that have to be met by God advancing on us rather than us advancing the kingdom on God. So in the end, all religions present you a ladder, and if you keep climbing the rungs of the ladder, obviously you become more prosperous, you become more powerful, you become more charismatic, you'll probably get a very pretty wife, and somehow you'll make it into heaven. That's not Christianity. Christianity is heaven has to come down, find you face down in the midst of all your problems, and you have to be taken. And this is a whole problem that we've got. we keep thinking that it's all our fault, that if we're not being blessed, it's something we're not doing. And that's the antithesis of the teaching of Jesus. The teaching of Jesus is, listen, when you really understand me, it's when you've got nothing to offer, and I've got everything to offer for you. So how about you just hop into my arms and I'll give you a cuddle?
Can we? It's a bit. That's a bit. Jesus is my boyfriend kind of stuff,
No,
because you are the songwriter. You are the music maker. I'm going to stop you, sir, right there. Sounds like you've known Brian Houston for a while. Can I throw you right back to, I don't know, you tell me, 1980 something? How did you, Geoff Bullock, how did you find yourself at that place?
well, I will
I mean,
get
you
back
were
to
normal, right? You were normal before this.
I was a normal guy. I was a normal guy. I'd gone to private school. I grew up on the North Shore of Sydney. I was an intellect. I've been a musician since I was 7. I had a really good cultural upbringing, and I was a spiritual milkshake. And so how it came about was just
What
a
does
very
that mean? What's the spiritual
spir-
milk?
spiritual milkshake. I was interested. Whatever you want to put in the milkshake, a little caramel, that's a little bit cream, a little new age, and a little bit of astrology, and a little bit of spiritualism. And I was very interested in spiritual things from a very, very early age. And a friend of mine who became an Assemblies of God pastor, well, he was part of Hillsong initially, as the first associate pastor, a guy called Michael Smith. And he had a salvation experience that totally changed his life. He took me along to Christian Life Centre, Sydney in 1978, November the 18th, 1978. And I went forward on a born again altar call and joined the club.
How did you know Mike?
Well, I met Michael because he was going out with my sister when I was 16. So this is what we used to call fourth years. So this is 1972.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that's just
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like one of those great Aussie stories of how AC/DC or Silverchair formed or something,
Well, look, if you really want to talk about the beginnings of Hillsong, it started long before Brian Houston left New Zealand. It started with just a bunch of people getting together and being a part of Frank's church, that when Brian arrived, the relationships were already there. And
which relationships? What
Well,
other?
there was Michael Smith and myself. There was a guy called James Halliday. There was James's mother and father-in-law. There was a whole lot of people from churches around the North Shore, as well as everything else that happened.
So you were there before Brian.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And Frank was at the helm.
Yeah, Frank was this funny guy in a white safari suit. And if anybody my age will remember the Minister for Immigration, Al Grasby. So he was a bit like Al Grasby. You Google Al Grasby, select images, and you'll get what Frank looked like. And he was busy. I mean, I grew up in Sydney's North Shore, and starting to see Frank prancing around the stage like some old-time vaudevillian master of ceremonies, telling these very widely hard to believe stories. But at the same time, the buzz in the room, and there was a sense of belonging and a sense of community. And there was something really spiritual, nothing like what it's become now. It was very, very old-time Pentecostal. And so for a spiritual milkshake, it was easy for me to pull out most of the ingredients and I was left with one.
How'd you been raised? Your family, they're, religious.
My parents were married in 1950. It was my father's second marriage. I came along in 1955 and my sister in 1957. And they did very well financially, and they built a modest house, because in those days, you didn't flaunt your prosperity. I mean, we never got on planes together. We never got on liners. We didn't stop at Versace, and we didn't have garage sales to get rid of them. Just a little nudge there. And my sister Jane and I, she was sent to Ravenswood. I went to Knox Grammar. And so all our friends were part of the North Shore. Their parents were part of the North Shore business community, and we had the influence of a private school education. And we had an upper middle class upbringing. And I suppose in a way, there was an intellectualism about it. And my father was a very remote man. And my mother was, I suppose, because of his remoteness, she was always seeking attention. And so Mum was the type of person that needed to love on you and have you all to herself to heal her lack of affirmation. Maybe it was from Dad or for whatever. And of course, Dad was remote. So I think in my own life, I was always looking for father figures, which just sort of, and along came Frank, and then Brian.
I don't know if many other people have spoken, some of them on this very show, that, that sense of belonging that stands out because there was something not there.
In their own life, there's something lacking, and you suddenly arrived, and you were instant. I can remember when I walked into the foyer, we were meeting in the Kuala Motor Inn, Oxford Street, Darlinghurst, just in Hyde Park. And I walked in, it was just, a room for seminars and things. And the minute I walked in, people came up, hello, and their eyes were bright and clear, and they were very lovely and loving and intensely accepting. You walk into that. And then you're told gently at first that this affirmation is this wonderful thing. God calls it unconditional. But when you get through to it, you realize there's that conditionality to it. People aren't being affirmed and being beloved. You have to join, and then you have to join and help, and then you must build together. And if you step out of line, all of a sudden you're on the outside of it. And then you quickly find out what you're doing wrong, and you come back. And so, what do they call it? The mouse wheel continues. You're on a treadmill of conditional behaviors for affirmation. The trouble is, you put God in that, you're left with not just a social insecurity, community insecurity, you're left with a spiritual insecurity.
Let's just take a quick step. Isn't that whole kind of biblical principles, the salvation thing, the same sort of thing where it's like, I love you unconditionally, but you have to give your life to me? So isn't it sort of a replica of...
Well, how deep do you want to go here?
I know. I just had to say.
I've got a very good answer for you, but it's just that, well, look, I'll wade in, edit it out or edit it in. But to me, I see Jesus like a computer in. Okay? But you can't connect your computer to the main street. You need an interface. And all you're doing is getting connected to the source of life. And you said, about this conditional sense of God. Well, I actually don't think it looks conditional from the outside. But to me, I'm having Wi-Fi problems. And I'm having real trouble getting a connection with my Wi-Fi. Like most people in the universe these days, you can't get proper Wi-Fi. You can't get a proper phone signal. You can actually plug your computer into the phone socket and you get perfect internet. Now, I'm just saying, basically, what Christianity is being plugged in. It's the opportunity to plug into life itself. Now, it's not a conditional part about it. It's just a cooperation of walking forward and finding out what works and what doesn't work. The love is never switched off.
I should have prefaced that by saying I meant the evangelical born-again Christian model that you walked into as well, that Frank preached, was, I'll give you unconditional love, God will give you unconditional. It's the same sort of thing, or you burn in hell.
Well, and I agree with you, and that's the way it's been presented, and the way it's been presented is conditional. God only responds to the good stuff he responds to the good and he responds to the bad. It's blessing or curses. Well, that's Jewish. That's Judaism.
Yes, I put before you, yeah.
And that is not what Christianity is. But it's far easier to teach something that's conditional and make God somewhat angry with you if you do wrong, because then you can get anybody to do anything, because all you have to do is say to them, I think your life is not being blessed because you're not doing enough for God. And here's a list of the things God wants you to do. Oh, involved, it's got a dollar sign on it as well. Isn't that the perfect Ponzi scheme?
Yes, I'd like to rename it Ponzianity. Funny you should bring it up.
Well, I've got to a point where I have said that a lot of what we call Christianity is Christless. It's an I-anity. You can put anything in front of it.
Oh, I like that.
It's a blind-anity or it's a tithing anity.
Ponzianity. Oh, love
But
it.
Oh, Tanya, if it's going to be hard for you with me at the moment because I'm in a bit of a spiritual renewal. So, and
Are you
that
writing?
I've written the best songs that I've ever written in my life.
Oh, wonderful.
In the last 3 months, they're not just songs, poems, photographs. My life at the moment is a creative explosion, and I feel like I've been reunited with a lovely old friend who I've just been pissed off with for a while, and suddenly realized that I got him wrong, and he was just trying to help. And I can be a stubborn little bastard.
I mean, this has been a bit of a theme for you throughout life with the spiritual milkshake. Hey, like it hasn't been straightforward. You invented like picket fence stuff.
Never drove a Holden Commodore with a double garage and just drove into a nice, comfortable Christian house, and everything was happy until the back.
Yeah, you've been quite open about that. You shared a lot of that with people. Now, please bear in mind, we've got some people who may not know all the details. Let's go back to 78, right?
Let's go 78 again.
Good old days.
Well, if you'd asked me a spiritual question,
I mean,
go back.
Well, yeah, I mean, something else we had discussed a couple of weeks ago was, I mean, we need to talk for a few hours about the music, but I guess we'll get there.
I have all the time in the world now because I'm now able to. I'm no longer silenced.
What changed? What's changed now?
The change is that I don't think people think. The majority of people are not thinking that I'm an attack of the devil. They are standing back and saying that this organization has simply attacked itself. And the reason why all of a sudden it's in the eyes of the media, as salacious as it all is, and the headlines are, it's selling thousands of clicks, hundreds of thousands of clicks. The problem is we're discovering it's got feet of clay and it's falling all down by itself. No one is pushing this over. I remember saying to you 18 years ago, Tanya, when you were first coming up, just first writing your book back in 2005, you were an apprentice firebrand of the firebrand you are now. And I just said, be careful. Don't try and push this thing over. It will fall on you. It has to fall by itself. Yeah. And then we can commentate and say, we saw it happening, but we couldn't say it until the evidence is there. The evidence and and Channel 7 have just done 2 programs, and they've now renamed Hillsong Pulse. And that's tragic, but it's because, hey guys, I'm sorry, Phil and Lucinda, Brian and Bobby, and the rest of you, consequences. This is not spiritual. This is just simple consequences of poor decisions.
Just briefly, like precisely when did you feel that evidence happened where you went, yeah, great, I can exhale?
I think it was Carl Lentz.
Okay.
And Brian's response to Carl Lentz and the awareness that there was something not right. And there was a pervasive air where people were starting to question this extraordinary, in inverted commas, move of God. And there were doubts arising. And I felt that I'd always wanted to speak. But every time I spoke, I got my head cut off. And the things, and it still happens.
By whom? Sorry, where?
Basically, Brian, But then because everybody feels sorry for Brian, because he's got that ability to make people feel sorry for him, and I fell for that suddenly the loyalty. So I just felt permission in myself. Maybe it was just that I felt permission in myself. And I did the podcast was up with, I was a teenage fundamentalist people, and I just let go. Then I did the Richard McHugh thing, and then the Warner Brothers Potato Advocate thing, and the Discovery Channel thing, and
Yes.
Channel 7 thing, and that weekly thing. And there's more to come, because I finally I can look. I'm known. I've got a voice. I've written these songs, and I brought these songs brought comfort to people, and there's enough goodwill for people to realize I'm not an attack of the devil. Far be it. I'm just trying to say, look, this is not a spiritual. This is not necessarily a spiritual judgment. We'll have to leave that up to God. This is just the simple consequences. As I said, it's the consequences of poor business management, elective accountability, getting too big for your boots, and people being scared to tell the truth, to the point with covering up the truth. If you're covering up the truth, what are you doing? You must be lying. I mean,
Yeah.
isn't it that simple? And if you're lying and you're teaching people that this is the truth and this is the word of God, but you're covering up the truth, but where does this lead you? In natural terms, let's forget about the spiritual terms. And this is these consequences. We've seen it happen with politicians. We've seen it happen with royalty. We've seen it with internet business finances. Where hubris pride goes before a fall.
And doesn't that make it even more stunning when there are so many now, highly publicized incidents of people's bad behavior coming out, and yet, they keep pushing this kind of denial. And Geoff, please describe Mike Smith, because he's like a fifth Beatle or something. Like,
He's like a Beatle.
he was there.
He was there at the beginning. He was Michael was the theologian. Brian was the evangelist.
Yeah.
Michael was the associate pastor, and he was biblical. Michael, he loved his Bible. He was biblical, and he preached the Bible. He wasn't a motivational speaker. Far from it. And I met Michael when he was 16. He had long hair, parted in the middle, and a moustache, and he'd sort of sit down like that, and he'd look through his hair, and then he'd pull it up and do like, and to a 16-year-old Knox grammarian, boy from Knox, very, very conservative with bands on his teeth, and he was intense.
Oh.
And I wanted to be cool, I certainly wasn't cool. And so we became really, really good friends. So when Michael had his born again experience, it was so dramatic, I checked it out for myself. And that's when we talked again, and we go into a culture that is conditionally accepting.
How old are you at this point? Are you the
How
same
old
age
was I?
as him?
I'm a year younger. So Michael was born on December the 7th, 54, on November the 6th, 55, and Brian is February 17, 54. So we are all the same age.
Wow. And your memory, that brain.
Don't ask me about last night, but I can remember dates and times, Yes, I've got a very long memory. You asked about Michael being the fifth Beatle. So Michael would do the morning services and Brian would be the evangelist at night. And Michael was a good preacher, but he was a goofy guy. I used to say to him, Michael, you are the only guy I've ever seen who gets tangled up in a cordless microphone. That was Michael. If there was any stage, that should make me trip over a stage. When he was walking around, he was just goofy and clumsy. And very, very sincere Christian. And we're still in touch. Very sincere Christian.
Wonderful. Okay.
And a good man who left Hills Christian Life Centre in the very, very early 90s, and one of the few people that was allowed to leave.
Why was he allowed to?
He said to Brian right from the beginning, I want to pastor my own church. The deal with Brian and Michael became the associate pastor, and he ran a book business, and I another friend bought the book lists from him. And Michael became the associate pastor, but he would always straight up with Brian, I want to have my own church. So I'm not here forever. When God opens the door, I'm going to walk through it. And that's precisely what he did. He went down to Harvest Christian Life Centre in Melbourne. Brian found a very effective way to lock the door after that. Well, you sense, Brian had to, if you were dispensable or in the way, or you had other goals, he'd send you to build his kingdom elsewhere. It was all about Brian. Still is.
All right. When do you meet him and what do you think? And then what happens and stuff?
When I first,
how old are you and Mike when you go and sign up?
So no, I just turned 23.
Okay.
Michael was just about to turn 24 and Brian was 24.
You're also, wow.
We're so young. So when I first met him, so he came over with the beautiful Bobby, who was a sweet, gentle, everything. And we always trusted Bobby to sort of, we hoped that she was the great spiritual influence of, not just spiritually, the character of spirituality on Brian. And he'd get up, Frank, and give him the pulpit now and then. But the one thing you could say about Brian, he was never really a great orator, a great preacher. He was a tremendous motive. He got you caught up in his enthusiasm. But in the early days, you certainly wouldn't think that Brian was marked for greatness. In fact, you wouldn't think any of us were marked for greatness. I mean, when we finally started Hills Christian Life Centre in August of 1983, who would have dreamt that this funny bunch of 20 people in their late 20s in the stick in the Hills district, 12 years later, had a platinum called in the States and create absolute Christian music history in 12 years. A bunch of misfits.
The influence, the infiltration, good or bad, I mean, whatever, is fascinating. I'm so glad you said that because, I've been saying that, and I even saw Brian's brother in court, and I said, because he's a knock-em-out kind of bloke, he doesn't say much.
I've only met Graham once. It was very interesting. There are the notables, and then there are the others that have to perpetually live in Brian's shadow.
Wonder how that's all organised as well, because his brother attended court every day. There wasn't much interaction at all. So, they don't chat. It's like he was, performing a duty or something, or, who knows.
I've got a great relationship with my sister, always had a great relationship with my sister. We've always family. Brian, other than in the early days with his elder sister, Brian has been the sole Houston.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he was the Houstons. He even eclipsed his dad in the last 10 years of his father's life.
Indeed.
And for the other four, it must have been very difficult that the baby brother became so immensely powerful and did share that. Did not, how do I put it?
Who would have thought? Well, because that's what I'm saying. I said to Graham right at the end, because why not? He's standing there, just whatever. Because he's a fireman by trade. So you can kind of tell he's probably spent a lot of time sitting and waiting patiently, as they have to on shift.
Isn't it rather funny that his father preached about the fire of God, that Brian teaches about the fire of God? What great about putting out fires.
Oh, that's cute.
That's hilarious.
It is all about hellfire and...
Yeah. It's just rather odd that the three men in the family all about fire. Never thought about that before.
No, so I had said to him right at the end, I said, you may as well tell him, look, tell your family I never set out to do anything because, I never thought he'd make it out of Windsor Road. Did you?
Well, no, perfectly honest, Daniel, when we first started, it was just a bunch of blokes having a lot of fun. The music really raw and rough, and then some of the churches around the area started to hemorrhage, and they hemorrhaged their leadership team, gave us leadership and experience, and they hemorrhaged the music department, so they gave us musicians and singers. We suddenly gained some really, really good people, and people with really good experience, the Cameron Wades of this earth. You want to say who really put Hillsong on the map? Forget my music. It was Cameron Wade's productions ability. I mean, hello, Brian, there's a great big foundation under your ministry with this huge foundation of concrete right down on the rock. And it's not Hillsong, it's Cameron Wade. And without people like Cameron Wade or Bob Wallace, or Harry Cass, all these people from the past that have been bulldozed out of the way.
Yeah.
It was fun because there were great foundations there. One more history, Tanya, we talk about all the people, all the unknown heroes. I mean, it's sad that Brian is on the record for tweeting that I'm delusional about a tension seeker. He said, Geoff Bullock made up the name Hillsong. Well, I don't care who made up the name Hillsong. I have to point out to Brian. But what about Darlene? What about Russell Frager? What about David Moyes? What about Adam Simic on the drums? Stewie fell on percussion. What about Ian and Lucy?
Yes, Lucy was
What?
Yeah, but
Well,
she
yeah, what
wasn't
about-
God.
No, but what about she wasn't Bullock conducting the choir? What about Annabelle Chappie? What about Rob Eastwood? What about Steve?
Yeah,
First
yeah.
people? What about the late Alan Shire? Without those people, you can't put a name to it. Brian and Bobby did not pioneer Hillsong. They just did not. This huge heap of unknowns pioneered Hillsong, and Brian's was renamed Church Hillsong.
In fact, I was having this conversation the other day. Somebody like Phil Pringle at C3, he created that. These guys inherited it anyway from Frank.
I could give you that's really lovely. Phil Pringle is he's a songwriter, and many of their earliest musical compositions Phil wrote, and Christine was a singer. She recorded albums. So Phil and Christine came into a movement that they built artistically, not just by the force of personality.
Yeah, I'm not heralding one over the
No,
other.
just the difference between Hillsong and Hillsong is that you can see in the birth of Christian Church, which becomes C3, you could see that Phil and Christine did an awful lot to contribute to the music and the culture of it. Where Brian, he was very fortunate that he kept finding really, really talented people, and he used them, and I suppose he abused them until they were spent using somebody else. Look, I've been come to this conclusion, and you can use this or not. When I think of one single thing that Brian did to build that church, one thing, I can't think of anything. He preached. He made people feel sorry for him. He was a great builder of enthusiasm, but he gathered around people that he bullied into submission to build something that he put his nameplate on. That's really?
Right, there are no restrictions. However, we have noticed a pattern at around 2 a.m. when the bottle is empty. Certain people jump on Twitter and,
And you see, in the end, now that is just tragic for Brian. And
it's, and we used to think, he looks like he's drunk on Twitter. Turns out he was. And what I found fascinating about his tweets towards you is that out of the whole show, some hour-long show, that was his takeaway.
well,
He is hurt over you.
That to me, and it was pointed out, Tom Tilley did a second episode a couple of weeks later on Spotlight and Channel 7. It's worth watching because it's well documented.
It's on YouTube as well for
Yeah.
our
The allegations that were made, that all happened under Brian's watch. I just happened to say, I'll say it all the time, well, I made up the name Hillsong as we floated around my swimming pool in late 1984. A good year before Darlene turned up to the church. And it was just the name of the music team.
everybody knows.
Why would Brian find that the most horrible thing that he had to defend when the whole documentary was about the horror that Hillsong had become to where they could quite legitimately put up Hillsong?
Fake news to him. And when you look at what happens when narcissists age, you would think they might mellow, but they dig down, and the denial, as you've seen, has gone up. And it's that personal attack, that lack of impulse control that is fascinating. And you're the one that was taking up rent in his head.
But see, the thing that disappoints me even more than that is just the descent of Brian's character. Mate, what's happened to you? I remember.
Take me back. You're 24. He's 24. What's the friendship like? What's it like to be friends with 25-year-old Brian and then, and Mike, and then...
Well, we were buying houses, having children.
Right. Yeah, you had a job. You all had jobs, didn't you?
I was a cameraman at the ABC, and I've been 10 years. That was quite significant. I was working on many of the main shows as the leader of a camera. 10 years, and that's where I learned all my production experience.
Not back 24 though.
No, so I worked at the ABC from 75 to 85,
Okay.
and then Hills CLC came along. What was Brian like to be with? Look, we had a lot of fun together. We'd share a meal, we'd watch videos together, we'd clown around in the pool, we'd go to the beach together, we were social together. As the church grew, Brian and I often would travel together, and I'd do a seminar, he would do a seminar. We used to do question and answers. We'd sit beside each other, and people would throw questions at us, and we were definitely a team.
I mean, you're a well-educated man with, you're articulate and creative, and, that you don't strike me as having a lot in common with this Kiwi. It's very clear in some of this old footage that's coming out. You guys were very close friends, the group of partners initially at Hills. Good mates in your late 20s or so.
I remember his 30th birthday. I remember them bringing cake down the aisle in the Baltimore Hills Public School. I remember his 40th birthday. We held it at a venue at the Rock. Brian was intensely lovable. Brian, sometimes he's not going to like this, but he doesn't like anything I say anymore, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not in the business of flirtation.
He's also got other problems, I think, yeah.
But I mean, Brian, he was vulnerable. He knew he had a temper. He knew he was abrasive. He knew he could take it too far. And he was apologetic about the way he treated me in those days. He even came to me one day and said, Bobby came to me the other day and says, you keep treating Geoff this way, he's going to leave. Now, that was back in 1988, 1989. I can remember it clear. It was up from one. So Brian, he had this ability where you felt that Brian was a victim of his own weaknesses, and therefore you had to stand around him and be his armor bearer and help him through, because his strengths outweighed his weaknesses, but his weaknesses needed to be supported because he was flawed. The problem for Brian is that too many people got around him and prophesied over him and laid hands on him, and he lost that gentle softness to be malleable, have a malleable spirit, a malleable personality, and his arrogance and self-belief and his fractured ego and insecurity took over to the point where he couldn't be accountable because it was a threat. And we now see the Brian who has been charged with a medically dangerous blood alcohol level, an obvious problem with prescription drugs, which, let's forget about the morality of it. It says this man is in emotional turmoil and he's self-medicating. So it's sort of like if this was business, if he was a CEO or a politician,
Right.
hey, man, you are really ill, you're about to have a breakdown, and we need to send you off to rehab. Just need to turn the lights off, put away the microphones, and
Huh.
you need to be healed. But for Brian, it's getting broken my heart because this is my mate. This is my buddy. I'm watching this guy, and no one is putting him in an emotional ambulance, turning on the siren and going, goodbye. You won't see this guy for a while until he gets better. He's getting worse.
What do you see worse? What do you mean?
Well, when you watch Brian on some of his posts these days into a phone, I mean, what's happened to the television studio, the lights, and all the Bible college students, and the makeup, and the people dressing him and propping him up in the chair, supporting me. Brian's alone with a phone speaking into a phone. He's the ex-global pastor.
Mm.
It is the most horrible descent to what's happening, and my heart breathes for the man.
I mean, please, I just want to stay on this point for a moment because so many people wrestle with that, not necessarily even Brian, but, that lovability of these people. I mean, we'll use Brian as an example because it's mad, versus these horrendously cruel or criminal or, cold, sociopathic actions that they've done or overseen or condoned or concealed or whatever. Tell me how that kind of how do you throw that together? How do you override? I mean, you've had a personal example of that kind of destructive element of that man's personality, and yet here's your heart. And you're certainly not alone in that, is one of it. Do you know what I mean? This is for people, and you're closest to it.
I think Brian and they
What continues to resonate with you?
and yeah, I'll give you a really simple answer. I'm a serious follower of the life of Jesus. I cannot escape his life and turn my back on what who he's asking me to be just because somebody's hurt me. I mean, it'd be easy to get angry. Well, of course I get angry, but it'd be easy to destroy. It'd be easy to get a poison pen out. It'd be easy for me to open a Twitter account and attack. I can't do that. I don't know what happened to me, why I've got a reservoir of love in my life, because I can be a totally anointed asshole. Double portion asshole anointed. I don't know why, but I look at Brian and I can't. I feel compassion. I hate watching it happen.
Sure. Again, back to that really, those strong friendships that were formed way back when. It's so strong. There are your peers are also, I've heard from other people that have concerns for him or,
You'd have to be blind, Charlie, not to have concerns for him. The journalists that I've spoken to, in between when you turn the camera off, they're concerned for him. They've got a job to present a story that sells newsprint or ratings or an audience. And so they do it in a tabloid way. There really hasn't been a very serious interview that's gone to press or gone to broadcast that is a very serious dissection of what has got us here. Tom Tilley, El Hardy, Rich McHugh, intelligent people who can't help being concerned for the man.
They weren't hurt by him directly, they weren't very close friends with him who suffered at the hands of.
And my first marriage broke up, and I take 100% accountability for the 100% of the things I did. And my children, it created emotional turmoil in their lives. There's no point being angry with who said or what they said. We have to be wounded healers here. The healing that we receive inwardly, spiritually, and outwardly from friends, and from just being raw and vulnerable and saying, I stuffed. The only person I can change is me. I can't mind other people to change. If I change, at least I heal myself, and then I can heal somebody else. We're so busy fighting each other. It's about time we just turned our vitriol and our anger on ourselves and said, God's sake, be accountable to yourself.
I was still going to argue that because that's you.
No, that's not me. No. That to me is just being an honest human being.
And there's more where that came from. We got cut off there. And then we got back to talking, and then someone came to the door. So there's like a little 5-minute middle piece. I've already made, well, the AI made a video for us. It's hilarious. I'll put that out soon. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening in. I hope you enjoyed it. Some real up close and personal stuff. It's just incredible how young they were. Well, I thought they were old. I remember being 14 and Pat Mercedes was 28, and I think like Geoff was 30 and like Brian was 32. I was like, no, that's old. So that was really cool finding that stuff out. And I still got a good chunk for you for part 2. Thank you so much for joining us at Leaving Hillsong to talk about Leaving Hillsong. Your company is so appreciated. If you've got any comments or feedback or stories or things you want to add or, messages you want to send, I don't know, jokes or donations, I don't know. Speaking of donations, thank you so much to my Patreons. If you want to be one of them, find Leaving Hillsong on Patreon. Not really good at the Pentecostal push, but I've also got PayPal. The second episode will be with you as soon as possible. I'm just keen to come back for more. I wonder if I can talk him into a Q&A or something. Anyway, thank you for being here. Please continue to like and subscribe and share. Share this with someone who you think might benefit from it, because that's what we're here for. Connections and sharings and understandings. We'll do part 2, and then it's the countdown to the verdict. August 17. So you know that this is the time that I'm going to tell you to be extra kind to yourself, extra kind to other people, bringing up a lot of stuff for a lot of people. You know, it's not necessarily a Hillsong thing, this. It affects a lot of people. Very interesting to hear that somebody who is on trial for concealing a pedophile was so very, very loved and vulnerable, apologetic. Who knew? So don't forget to catch part 2, which will be with you very soon. And keep leaving Hillsong. We'll talk soon. Bye.